two, check one, two. Mic check one, two. Mic check one, two. All right, we live. So this is gonna be a quick live, real quick live. I'm gonna talk about. I'm gonna talk about a remote remote viewing. Not really a remote viewing. It's more so a technique that I coined. The technique is called. What did I call the technique? Um, remote. I called it remote probing. So the technique is called remote probing. It's a psychic technique derived from remote viewing techniques. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about. I'm going to talk a little bit about that technique, remote probing. So that I developed a psychic protocol using some of the protocols of remote viewing. Now, um, I may start doing some. Cause they eliminated my other channel. Um, so, but on this channel, I may start doing some. I may just do some remote viewing, more remote viewing stuff. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I think I may do more remote viewing stuff and start publishing it. But anyway, I wanted to talk about a remote viewing session, remote probing, sorry, session that I did. Let me get the terms correct because it's not remote viewing. It's something I developed called remote probing, where a technique where I try to probe. Um, I try to I try to take a look at psychically, take a look at future events, and then probe that time period to find out what will happen in a particular block of time, and based on correlating events. So I think on this one, I used basically nuclear strikes on as the correlating event, the anchor event. I used nuclear strikes on London, basically outside of Ukraine, and greater Europe like London, and I think as in the experiment. And so I started to try to look at what um, what would be correlating events, right? To try to just without everything going on, I just thought it would be an interesting experiment. And so I used as the anchor event, I used nuclear strikes, I think on London, based on a psychic called Cairo, a famous psychic who said London and Israel would be destroyed by Russia in World War III. He also correctly predicted that the Israelis would get into, were going to, white Jews were going to go into Palestine and try to take it over, not because of religious reasons, but because of oil and gas. And if you look recently, they did an oil and gas deal with the where they're starting to exploit oil and gas in that area. So the Irish psychic Cairo, was 100% correct about the motivations of the so-called these Jewish people, right, in the land of Palestine. That eventually would be revealed that they would go there to exploit known oil and gas reserves found under and around Palestine, Israel area, Syria. The Syrian borders and all of that. So, and that was their real motivation for going into that area, not necessarily because they're somehow the chosen people of God and all that bullshit that you hear. It was about oil and gas reserves, and now you see those oil and gas reserves being exploited. They made a deal with, I think, the Lebanese, because they were fighting over like oil and gas rights, and they made a deal with them to exploit some of that and pump it out without being fighting with the Lebanese. So they totally sold out. And so that prediction that he made was 100% true about why they were going into Palestine. And he made this prediction about the oil and gas in Palestine and Palestine, Israel. He made that prediction back in I think it was 1945 or some shit like that. So I think prior to them becoming a state, right? So this guy's Cairo was, he did an excellent job. I guess he's a remote viewer, a remote probe, whatever you want to call his techniques. And so um, I thought it was interesting. So I looked. What I tried to do was take that same event that he predicted, which was nuclear strikes on London or strikes on like London, places outside of Ukraine. I use basically his prediction as a reference point. Pretty much what I was trying to do to see what if he was. I mean, because he was right about what happened in Israel, so I'm assuming he's right about the strikes. He also said Israel and London would be destroyed. By Russia. You know what I mean? In the Third World War, and so we see that taking place. We see the hostilities between Israelis and Russians, hostilities between the British and the Russians. We see, the war in Ukraine. So it's a fascinating take. So I decided to probe that event to see what would happen, what would come back, what kind of feedback would I get if I probed Cairo's prediction, right, of London being struck, in World War III. So when I started probing it, it's funny, right? Also, it would tell me, give me if it was gonna happen, it would give me an idea of exactly when it would take place. So when I did this session, which I'm not gonna show, I don't need to really. But when I drew up the target and I started probing the events, one of the first things that popped up in the session was Kanye West, and I thought that was weird. But I wrote it down. Like I was like, I meditate, clear my mind, start looking for signal line, and start looking for um, spontaneous signals, of information or whatever, spontaneous information related to the target that would give me an idea of time frames. So that's how I kind of position my cognition. And the first thing that popped into my mind was Kanye West. So I wrote that down and I was like, Kanye West, what the fuck does that have to do with it? But I wrote it down anyway. And that's how you do remote viewing. It doesn't matter. Like if you get a word that pops into your mind, you don't think about it. Or you get an image, you don't really think about it. Like it could be, you could feel like it's unrelated, but it actually is related. And once you get used to that, it's not a problem. So I was like, oh, Kanye West, that's weird. But I wrote it down immediately. And then I started getting Bitcoin, right? So then I got Kanye West and Bitcoin. And I was like, Bitcoin? What the fuck does that have to do with London getting nuked? But I was like, Kanye West, what the fuck does that have to do with? You know? And then I got what else did I get during that session? I got Kanye West, Bitcoin, and it was something else that I got in that session. But yeah, the two most important things I took away from that was basically Kanye West and Bitcoin. And so basically we're correlating events. And you're kind of seeing that right now. Like something's going to happen with Kanye West, and then something's going to happen with Bitcoin. And what I think my analysis of the data at this point is Kanye West, something's going to happen to him, right? And I get the feeling it's going to be physical, right? Something's going to happen with him. I could be wrong about the event, but I'm starting to feel like it's an event, like like he's gonna get hurt, possibly, and something to that effect. And then that's kind of what I'm getting from they're gonna go after him. And then send somebody after him, like like Nipsey Hussle, like they sent somebody at Nipsey Hussle. And also that Bitcoin is gonna crash. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying it's zero, but it's gonna crash. So, and those two events came up. Right? Well, that's how I felt. I just got Bitcoin. It didn't say crash, but I'm saying crash. And then I'm looking at what happened with FTX and different things, and that makes sense. That it wouldn't go up, but it would crash. I think Bitcoin's gonna go. It's gonna skyrocket, but I think in the initial term, it's gonna crash based on what I read. And at some point, then it's gonna skyrocket later. But I think initially over the next over the short term, it's gonna crash and it's gonna shock people with the crash. So Bitcoin is gonna be shocking, and something shocking is gonna happen with Kanye West. That's gonna shock people. And then when you see those two events right behind that, I'm feeling like that's when you're gonna get like um, World War III. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like when you see those two events, so basically that's what it was giving me. Like when you see these events, then you're gonna see basically Russians start striking outside of uh, outside of Ukraine for whatever reason. And right now, it's funny because you see the war expanding. Um, you see the Russians getting dug in, the war expanding. Um, you see some things going on with Ye, and then some things going on with crypto, where you have the FTX scandal, where FTX exchange was bought out, and then it crashed, different things. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up. But yeah, so that was the session. You know what I mean? It was Kanye West, Bitcoin. I think that was it that came up in the session. And then yeah, so I think these are two events you're gonna see something happen with those two, with Kanye West and with Bitcoin, and then you're gonna see, um, you know, a huge event as far as the war. Once you see those things take place. So anyway, but that was the remote viewing session that I was working on, and it said it came back, and now I'm seeing a couple of things. I'm thinking like, yeah, maybe that session was clean. You know, like you're gonna see something happen with Ye, and you're gonna see something happen with Bitcoin, and then at that point, uh, yeah, at that point, shit gonna get crazy. But anyway,